AI is going to rule the future of our information warfare battle with China. We're already in a war with China. And Alex Karp, CEO of Palantir, has some very choice words for US big tech monopolies that are deciding to work with China, but not truly work with the United States and the US government. You hear AI and ML, these letters used very closely together, artificial intelligence and machine learning. That's what it stands for. And basically they go hand in hand. You basically are training a machine how to think. And that's why you see them playing these board games, whether it's chess or Go, where now all the machines are beating the humans. You take that to the nth degree and you think about the information warfare, which we are currently in with China. We've had many guests on the show to talk about this. I've talked about this many times on the show. Think about practical applications of AI in the information warfare. So if you want to break into a database, if you want to break into the CIA or the Department of Defense, their servers, right? Those are protected by essentially AI, right? AI is actively trying to detect intruders. And then you have offensive AI, which is actively trying to penetrate into, your opponent's security system and steal information. How advanced your AI is going to determine how well you can play that battle, that game. Who's going to be able to break into the server first? Who's going to be able to detect the intruder first and then prevent, some kind of a software attack, as an example. And so Alex Karp just did this interview where he's been calling them out for a long time. I love it every time he calls them out, but he kind of touches on this a little bit more in detail around exactly what he's getting at with what these US tech monopolies are doing with China and are not doing with the US. So let's take a look.
The last 20 years, the enemy, if you will, for the U.S. and its allies, which you have helped with, has been terrorism, anti-terrorism in particular. Increasingly, the conversation has moved away from terrorism in the Middle East and more towards China. What do you think about that, and what role do you think you have to play in it?
Well, the public discussion has moved recently. But as you know from our many conversations, we've been very focused on what we've called the software war between America and its adversaries, where we believe, and as a company we've been saying for over a decade, this is not a conflict that's linear. So it's not like other conflicts where one country has a slightly better plane than another country has a slightly better boat than another. This is much more like what we saw in World War II, where one country develops a nuclear bomb and they set the rules. And we've been saying this in public, in policy circles for well over a decade. And because we've been saying it in public, we've been very focused on this in private for well over a decade. And a lot of the development on Palantir on the software end doesn't see the public eye for obvious reasons. But we've been very focused on what's generically called AI in the conflict or war setting for a long time, building on innovations we'd already built, the ways in which we work with data in bulk, and then data at the edge. And so as part of this conflict, our basic thesis was this is a winner-take-all conflict. The U.S. and its allies must have the best software in the world. We battled with Silicon Valley about this. Silicon Valley, I think, has changed somewhat.
Name of the show, he's used it now a couple times. AI being a winner-take-all mechanism for warfare. Very interesting concept, right? And you think, well, okay, where is the network effect in AI? I don't know if there really is a true network effect. Sure, you could have access to more data and you can train the AI with, more information and more models. Maybe that compounds upon itself. I think what he's alluding to, and he doesn't actually specifically call it out in this interview, is actually what you would call quantum computing. It's basically a step function, just like his kind of analogy to a nuclear bomb. It's a step function, right? It's actually more binary, right? Do you have atomic weapon or not, right? Do you have quantum computing capability or not? And when you do have quantum computing capability, it brings you to a whole other plane of warfare, of capability to crack those algorithms and those passwords and those encrypted files and and outmaneuver your opponent's moves. And every step of that AI-informed battlefield, which is now really runs the whole gamut of the spectrum of, but from kinetic to information warfare, has in some way either a hard dependency or an influence from AI. But when you can bring a step function level capability on AI, like quantum computing, which basically just means, if you have a supercomputer, it's saying like you got 100 supercomputers, right? If you've got a quantum computing capability, it's like you got 100 supercomputers compared to one supercomputer, right? It's you're in the Stone Age if you've got one supercomputer compared to 100. But it actually, honestly, the step function might be even greater. I'm not a quantum computing expert, but people that I know that know more about these kinds of things, this is the kind of stuff they're talking to me about kind of behind closed doors. And who's going to get to quantum computing first? And when you do, the AI capability that will unlock will be, his analogy, not mine, like having a nuclear bomb.
You've been, though, very critical of other Silicon Valley companies that have stayed in China. A number of Silicon Valleys have left China. But what do you think of those that are still doing business in China? The biggest, of course, is Apple.
We believe at Palantir, in full disclosure, if a company wants to work in an adversarial country, I just think they should work there and defend it. At Palantir, we have our views. Many times those views have been very controversial. We picked up and moved to Denver because our views were too controversial in Silicon Valley. We are an international business. We defend the U.S. government.
This guy just said they had to move their business to Denver, Colorado, because it was too controversial to be based in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley, because they're pro-America. They are pro-working with the U.S. Department of Defense and our Western allies. It's ridiculous. You wouldn't think this guy, right? Like you actually have to leave Silicon Valley.
We have certain values we stand by. If you want to work in China or in any other country that is adversarial or not adversarial to America, you should disclose it and defend it. Our view, though, is slightly different. You should work wherever you can ethically justify internally and externally. However, if you do not work with the U.S. government, you should disclose why you're not working with the U.S. government and why you're working with other governments that are adversarial to the U.S. government. And that's been our position. We, of course, at Palantir are very proud to develop products that make the Western world stronger. And we hope that those products put us in a position where we decide what the ethics of the world will be. We, America and its allies, not just in America, right. And therefore influence the world in a positive way.
Love that. What he's alluding to is going to be, one of our next topics around Tim Cook putting $275 billion into China. He's saying not only do you need to disclose and defend why you're working with an adversarial nation like China, but then you also need to disclose and defend why you are not working with the U.S. government. And that actually applies both ways with, unfortunately, I hate to say this, our large U.S. tech monopolies, right? There are a myriad of examples, which we've covered many times on the show, of them doing exactly that, working with China and then not working with the U.S. What you have to understand is that, like Google is a prime example. Google wanting to launch a search engine in China and doing it covertly, but then canceling some of its, guess what, AI weapons programs with the Department of Defense. Google will say, we still work with the Department of Defense, right? But are you actually working on the cutting edge stuff, on these kinds of things, right? On developing AI programs for military application. And that was exactly the kind of stuff that Sundar capitulated and caved to the Google powers that be that didn't want to work on those kinds of programs, right? And it's ridiculous. You got to have some kind of backbone as a leader to say, no, this is for a higher purpose. And even though we have a lot of employees that are either from the United States and are disgruntled with the state of political affairs in this country, or we also have a lot of employees that are not Americans and, might have differing opinions and interests and bias as to helping the U.S. Department of Defense. But these are ultimately U.S. tech companies This is the best country in the world. We need to be setting those ethics, just like Alex Karp described. And our US tech monopolies need to be helping with AI and bringing AI into weapons programs because you know that every single Chinese tech monopoly is doing exactly that with the Chinese government, CCP. And if they're not, those people are being hauled off to reconditioning camps and never seen again unless they change their tune. Or if they're not that important, they're probably just never seen again, ever. I love that Alex Karp takes a stand, comes out publicly, tells it how it is, has been doing this now for many, many years. At some point, our tech monopolies are going to have to wake up and develop not even a full, just part of a backbone. That's all I'm asking for. Just like a sliver of a backbone. I wouldn't expect you to have a full backbone, but just like a little bit of one would be great. Hi, I'm Alex. Thanks for watching the show. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, but even better, make sure to follow us on Odyssey, follow us on Rumble, and text us 203-646-5159. Text the word Monopoly. You'll be subscribed. You'll get updates about when we're going live, our latest videos, and we'll send you even a little goodie bag. And in the event that we all get banned from big tech, we'll still be connected.